Welcome to the Deadology Podcast. I'm your host, Howard Weiner, and this week I'm coming to you from the state of Florida. There was a big snowstorm ripping through the Northeast, besieged my beloved hometown of New Paltz. I picked the perfect time to do a vacation, visit some relatives, visit an old friend. And while I was down here, I interviewed one of my best friends, a longtime taper. So this is season 2, episode 2 of the podcast. I started a new season on New Year's Eve, New Year, new season, my rules. So it's season 2, and this is the second episode, and I'm sure you're going to love this one. The taper's name is Doug Schmell, and this guy is just such an interesting personality, and he has such a great love for the Grateful Dead, unlike anybody I've ever met in my life. And I had the pleasure of touring with him and getting tapes from him from years. So that he definitely helped create the person I am, the guy who writes the books and does the podcast. I owe a lot to this guy, Doug. And just he's such a great person to interview, and all this enthusiasm is going to come through. Another exciting thing about this interview with Doug is that Doug doesn't do social media. You haven't heard him on Facebook. You haven't read his posts on Twitter. He just doesn't do social media. Everything with Doug back in the day and still to this day is word by mouth. And so it's kind of cool that I'm getting to introduce him. Unless you know him, this podcast will be introducing him to an audience of Deadheads who are definitely going to appreciate this guy. You got to love him. So without further ado, here it is, my interview with Doug Schmell on January 7th, 2024. All right, now we're at the pop-up studio in West Palm Beach. I'm at one of my best friend's house, Mr. Doug Schmell, a prodigious Grateful Dead taper back in the day. Like I said, one of my best friends, and this man has turned more people onto Jerry Garcia back in the day by word of mouth than anybody except Jerry Garcia himself. So Doug, say hello to my audience. Welcome to the Deadology Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Howard. Yeah, Howie and I have been buddies and best friends for a long time since we met in high school. It's an absolute pleasure to be here speaking to you guys.
All right, let's go right back to how it all started for us. 1980. I'm living in Nanuet, New York. You're living in Spring Valley, 5 minutes away. We were loving classic rock albums. We used to obsess over them, listen to them nonstop. And then something changed. You went to sleepaway camp and you came back a different person. Tell us about your sleepaway camp experience.
Yeah, so this was 1980, and I went with a couple of friends. One of them, Mark Krieger, he's the one who turned me onto this camp, and he was a counselor there. So I went with him. I was only 17, but I think it was 17 was the minimum age to be a counselor. And there was one guy in particular there at the camp who listened to a lot of Grateful Dead. And I had started listening to them sporadically before that. I just remember knowing songs from Europe 72. That was the album that really resonated with me. And a guy had a stack of bootleg cassettes, and he was playing them. And the guy turned out to be a major taper in the day. His name was Steve Meisner. And I could not believe what I was listening to. And when I came back from camp, I just remember telling Howie and anybody who would listen how great Jerry Garcia was. Because as much as I loved the music of the Grateful Dead, and I did, what stood out for me was Jerry Garcia's guitar. The sound, the tone, his liquid leads, everything really resonated with me. I just remember I was looking for something in particular. I loved all the classic major bands of the time, but none of them stood out for me as my band. I wanted to have a band that was kind of something I could call my own. And when I found the Grateful Dead, they screamed out, "This is your band, Doug." And it was because of Jerry Garcia. So I remember telling Howie and a lot of other people, you gotta listen to this guy. He's unbelievable. And that's kind of what started our incredible love and following for the Grateful Dead.
Yeah. So I remember when you came back, it took me a couple months to really understand it and get into it. It's like a foreign language. If you've been listening to classic rock all your life, then all of a sudden you're presented with these long jams that are tempoed with jazz and all kinds of influences. It's like hearing Spanish and and you've been talking English all your life. But yeah, eventually I had the breakthrough, and we were on our way, man. It was your first two shows interest me. The first two you saw, are obviously the Philly Spectrum one, and what was Radio City, the next one?
Correct. Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about those two shows.
Yeah, the Spectrum show, I went with a couple of guys.
August 30th.
Yes, it was August 30th, 1980 at the Spectrum. And this was right after camp, so right after I caught the bug. And my friend, who Howard knows from high school, Charles Wolf, he indicated, let's go see the Dead. And there was a couple of guys, the Bruno brothers. These guys were very cool. They were long-haired, serious partiers like the Dead. And somehow we hooked up with them and we went to the show. Funny aside, we left to go see them thinking that the show we were going to see was on the 29th. Turned out that was the wrong date. They played two dates at the Spectrum. We were leaving to go to the Spectrum on Friday the 29th. I'm pretty sure that was the day of the week. Turns out the tickets we had, because I looked at tickets, I was like, guys, this is the wrong night. We got tickets for the 30th. Turned out the 29th was a great show, but not nearly as great the 30th. But that experience changed my life, and I'll tell you why. We got there, we were a little late, we had to wait on a line, and I actually missed the first 3 songs, I believe, of the set. When I walked in, I believe they were playing Friend of the Devil. So we missed the Feel Like a Stranger.
One of the best ones.
Yeah, it was a great Stranger. So, it sucks, but listening to it now, afterwards, I was like, wow, this would have been great to see. But a lot of these songs weren't that familiar with me at the time, mostly were. But I'll never forget walking in, settling in our seats, listening to Friend of the Devil, and then the set went on, and I was blown away by the fact that every person in that audience was standing and singing along with the songs. And I was like, what the fuck have you been missing, Doug? This is incredible. Look at the passion. Look at the energy. They sounded great. Everybody was into it. And they ended the first set with Althea. Now, it's funny. I didn't know Althea was called Althea at the time. I remember looking at song lists and cassettes that had the word space. And I thought Althea was space because the line, this space is getting hot. So I was like, oh, this must be space. And that Althea is the hottest one, bar none, ever. Yeah. It blew me away. And then to end the first set was one of the top 3, if not the number 1 greatest Jack Straw of all time. And Howie will confirm that. It blew the doors and the roof off of the Spectrum and left me speechless. I was just so freaking out, and it just the amount of energy that I just heard, and the incredible sound of the music, and the participation of the crowd and the clapping, and it just blew my mind. That was a defining moment for me. That's when I realized this is it. This is the band I wanted. Why have I not been following them all these years, Again, I'm only 17, but I knew about them at 14. I knew about them at 15. They had just played a few months earlier at the Nassau Coliseum in May. I probably could have gone to those shows, but I didn't get it. I didn't know it. I was not on the bus. Yeah. And boy, was I on the bus.
That Althea Straw, man, I can't imagine anybody who likes the Grateful Dead. There's no way you could not love that if you were there, because it was just so obviously hot. It's not a subtle, not a little thing that, guess what,
Correct.
Everybody there had to be blown out of their minds by those two, that ending.
People singing along with the lyrics. They knew the lyrics. I didn't. I was just jealous. And then it really hit me. The second set was also phenomenal. They did a great Scarlet Fire. I believe there's an Eyes of the World.
Fire, yeah.
There's a great Sugar Magnolia. I believe there's a Not Fade Away. Second set was also great, but what I really remember from that show was the end of that first set, and that was it. I was on the bus, and I wanted more.
Yeah, there's something about Althea, because for me, I saw it in my first show. I didn't know what it was either. I didn't know the name of the song.
Space.
And Madison Square Garden, and when I heard the tape of the 3981 Madison Square Garden was my first show. You and Pete Stoll played the tape for me, and I heard Althea, and I was like, my God, what is this? What a great song it is.
Amazing.
And I think John Mayer had the same
exactly.
reaction hearing the Nassau Coliseum version of Althea. So there's something about that song that's almost like a litmus test to whether you're going to be a Grateful Dead fan or not.
Yeah, that's the type of song that you can easily turn on to a non-Deadhead, and they will get it. Because the lyrics...
Or if they don't get it, they're never going to be a Deadhead.
They'll never be a Deadhead, correct. That's the kind. And my second show was at the Radio City Music Hall, which was a great show, 10/23/80. I remember they played Casey Jones, I believe, as a maybe at the end of second set or as an encore. Great show. There was a Music Never Stop. Not as hot as the Spectrum show, But that was a great show, and seeing an acoustic set was
what
great.
experience to get into radio.
Yeah, it was great. I didn't have to. I went with a guy we knew in high school, DeSalvo maybe. I think last name. Great guy, into the Dead. So I learned there were so many people into the Dead, and I didn't really know much about them, and it was just great meeting these people and being turned on to the music. And my third show you had just mentioned was 3981, the Madison Square Garden
Was yours
show.
310 or?
No, 39.
Oh, you were at the show.
Correct. I didn't go to 310.
Wow.
I went to 39. That show was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Great Uncle John's band. Great Feel Like a Stranger. So I'm now 3 for 3 in shows, and I'm feeling like this band could do no wrong.
Yeah, and you almost get that feeling like it's your. I felt this too. It was like my presence being there kind of made them hotter somehow, And I think everybody gets that feeling when you catch a lot of good shows.
Correct. And from that 3981 show, what sticks out as a great China Cat Sunflower. I know you writer. That really blew me away. That was great stuff. So this is my first China Cat. So now, I'm already on the bus. I'm loving what I'm seeing. I'm trying to go to as many shows as I can. In fact, I believe it was either later that month or a couple of months later, I saw the show at the Hartford in Connecticut. A great show with an unbelievable sugaree.
Feel Like Stranger sugaree.
Correct.
Right?
So sugaree started, and I think Howie had, attributed Hartford as being the mecca of the sugarees because there are so many great sugarees in Hartford and Connecticut, including Jerry Garcia Band. So it's just funny that you would mention that in one of your books, and it's true. So I'm well on my way. This is now 1981. I'm an impressionable 18-year-old at the time, and I couldn't even listen to most other bands at this point. I wanted to listen to more Jerry Garcia, more Grateful Dead.
Sure.
I was coveting it. I was craving it.
And that was great seeing Garcia Band back in those early days. My first show was the Palladium. I saw it at the Capitol. And
Yes.
What was your first Garcia show?
I believe it was like 213 or 2. Yeah. It was one of those early shows before I even saw the Garden show of 3981. I saw them with Pete Stowe. They were phenomenal. I remember seeing a Catfish John, How Sweet It Is. I was blown away. I mean, at this point, I'm like, this guy could do no wrong. Because I saw so many great shows. I hadn't seen a bad show yet. And sure, there's bad Grateful Dead shows. Would I have enjoyed it if I had been there? Probably. But I saw nothing but great shows. That's what really did it for me,
That's definitely me too. I had the same experience. It was great to get into it.
If you saw your first show and it was a bad show, and we know shows that Jerry's just not on, the band's tired, they're distracted, whatever.
But people seeing them in the 90s, and not to say they weren't as great. People were still so enthusiastic about the music and the culture.
Can you imagine seeing them in the early 80s, or for me, seeing them in the 70s, which, as Howie knows, and a lot of you will probably soon find out, that's my year, 1972. They could do no wrong. To me, that's the best year.
Hey, we do have a lot to get to, so I'm going to, one more thing before we jump ahead to your taping days. Alpine Valley. I remember I'm at Tennyson Park, we're playing basketball. You come up to me, you're like, hey, Howie, you want to go to the Midwest and see Garcia? And, of course, I'm saying yes. I had to check with the parents, make sure it was okay that I took the car that I inherited. But it was August 7th, East Troy, Wisconsin. That was like our living on the road. I never had read Kerouac before. But
we never did a road trip, I think, before that.
Well, yeah, a couple
that was a serious
Glens
road
Falls and stuff, but that was Wisconsin was another
right, Glens Falls was in New York, upstate New York. I was going to Albany. For me, that was easy. It was just a couple of hours, I think, north. But when we went to Alpine Valley, that was a great trip.
Where did you come up with the idea?
I just remember seeing, or somebody mentioned that they were playing there, and I heard that this was a great place to see a show, a great outdoor show. I heard that Wisconsin's beautiful, and that it was by an area called Lake Geneva on a lake. It's just a beautiful area. And I was like, why don't we go do this? We can do it. It's over a weekend. Little did I know, they played 2 nights. Little did I know they were playing 2 nights after this in Iowa. Yeah. And we could have gotten to Iowa. I never took the next step at this early part of my taping touring days.
We had no idea what the tour looked
like.
So.
I remember we ran into Ricky Barish.
Oh, yeah.
And we ran into
Spring Valley.
And the other guy, Glenn, I forgot Glenn's name, but Glenn Mayer. Glenn Mayer was a good friend of mine. Ricky Barish, I knew, was a huge Deadhead. And we saw them in Alpine. And sure enough, they had just come from seeing them, I think, in Kansas City. So these guys knew it. They were a little older than us and realized, you're going to go on tour. You do the whole tour. Howie and I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, they just played in Kansas City?
Yeah.
And oh, they're playing in Iowa?
The Kansas City show was great. The Iowa show was great.
Correct. It was a great tour.
That first Alpine show, they opened music, sugary music. May not have been the hottest one ever, but it was just like, I'm here. They're doing this because I'm here. They're playing my two favorite songs.
I remember after the show, Howie would not stop saying music, sugary music. How did they come up with this? Like, it was so creative. It's not the greatest music ever, and it's not the greatest sugary, but it's just the ingenuity behind it, and the creativity that really...
Now, it is the best Let It Grow 10 that first set.
Oh, my God. The Let It Grow 10 that first set was truly phenomenal. That's literally one of the best Let It Grows, if not the best that I've ever heard. And it was an official release, that show.
Yeah, that's it was Dick's 22 or something like that.
Amazing. Now, is that the show where they opened the second set with the China Cat?
Great China Cat also.
Great China Cat. I'll never forget that. We were just so impressionable at the time, but we knew we were seeing great shows, and appreciating.
That's cool. We were hunting Garcia's next great jam. That's
correct.
Everything was cool. It was great seeing the On the Road. It was all the culture was great. The drugs were great, but really, I think me and you were on the same boat. We were just looking for the next great jam because we knew we would get it.
Correct.
And had listened to the music for years. So.
And we knew people were taping, and Pete Stoll had turned me on to tapes from this era where people were starting to tape, and I got a lot of tapes from him of recent shows, so I knew about taping. And this was something that I knew, hey, I could probably get this show after, we went to Alpine.
And this is a good lead-in for the taping. I want to get to hear how you got into taping. Do you remember what your first show was?
That I taped?
Yeah.
Ooh. It was 1983. It was 1983 that I started taping. I was at Albany at the time, and me and a couple of guys, Larry Gindorf, and there was another guy.
I'm sure Larry will hear this. Larry listens to the podcast.
Yeah, Larry Gindorf was big instrumental. Shout out to Larry, a great guy, and a guy who got into the Dead very quickly. When I met him, first year of college, he was into Genesis, and he didn't understand the Grateful Dead, but after listening to a couple of Jack Straws, one from the Sanger Theater, and a couple others, forget it. Genesis didn't mean that much to him anymore, and all he wanted to do was listen to the Grateful Dead.
I have to interject something funny. So we're leaving for Alpine Valley. I pick up Doug. And I was heavily into Van Halen before I got into the Grateful Dead. Doug comes walking to the car. We're in the best mood. We're about to go to Wisconsin. And he holds out these Maxell tapes. And he says, Howie, this is bad news for Van Halen fans, this box. I'll never forget that line, man. It was like,
no, at the time, I wasn't trying to be antagonistic because Eddie Van Halen is a great guitarist. Not my style. Maybe it was before that. But I was just trying to convey the genius of Garcia and how people underrated this guy. Because if you listen to albums, you're not going to get it. But here I have a stack of bootlegs portraying how unbelievable this guy is, how amazing a guitarist he is, and people just didn't get it. So this was my shout out to the world. Hey, Howie, this is bad news.
I knew what you meant, man. I didn't take it personally.
So in 1983, we started taping. My first show might have been Richmond. Or because
you brought the equipment with us.
Correct.
Wow, I don't even remember
This is what we did. We understood that a lot. There were some other people in college in Albany that had been taping, and I learned the best way to get the stuff in because this was prior to the sanctioned taping section and taping shows. Yeah. Correct. So this is 1983. We learned that the best way to sneak stuff in is somebody has to act as an invalid and sit in a wheelchair. We rented a wheelchair. And we had somebody who would always be the guy in the wheelchair. And sure enough, you put all the taping equipment underneath the wheelchair. They had plenty of room there underneath. And that's how we started sneaking stuff in. And we taped, I think, every show of that spring tour in 83. We did Richmond.
Fall tour.
Right, fall tour. Correct, because college started. Yeah. This was now, say, September. Yeah. Right. And this was, now I had seen shows, if you recall, in spring of 83. And I did the whole tour. Yeah. That whole tour.
I missed two. You did the whole one.
I missed one show was in Orono, Maine. That's true. I missed one show. We caught the Brendan Byrne shows together.
Were you at Providence?
Yes, I was correct. The only show I did not see in the spring tour of 83 was Orono, Maine. But I wasn't taping yet. And then, sure enough, the beginning of the semester in September is when this all started. So we taped, I think, every show in that full tour, and they were great shows.
Oh, so you actually started that full tour?
Correct, in 83. Gotcha. That's when it started. 84, when we finally, they sanctioned the taping, I was sending away in that mail order and getting the ticket so I could sit in the taping section. And I started taping every show. I bought a microphone. I bought the tape stand. I was so well versed in how to do it, especially after we did it with the wheelchair, that I was not doing it on my own, not needing a wheelchair. It was easy, and I loved it. Now, it's funny, I don't really listen to those shows much now, and I still have them on cassette, because, my tastes have changed. I'm a late 71 to 74 guy. Those are my, primal years. But
they were essential back in the day.
Oh, my God. We would listen to those shows, and it was our formative years, of the Grateful Dead. And I'll never forget that. How much fun, the excitement that I felt the morning, waking up knowing that there was a Dead show that night was palpable. I'll never forget that. I mean, classes, I would go to class when I could, but knowing there was a Dead show that night was the driving force behind my college existence in 83, 84.
Well, everything else was secondary. If I had a job, then I had to
secondary.
quit the job. And,
if you had a girlfriend, secondary. You could meet another girl. Going to see the Dead was the primal important thing, and that was the driving force of our early, college years.
Yeah, hey, I got to ask you, you went to the one amazing set of shows you went to. I was always jealous I never went there. How was the Greek Theater when you went out there for the 20th anniversary?
Oh, yeah, that's when I graduated from college and I was about to start law school. So this was in between, ending my college experience and then going to law school. And I'll never forget that. I was, a little nervous. I wanted to continue with my higher education, but...
You had a higher education to attend to.
But the important thing was seeing as many shows as I could, and I'll never forget, those Greek shows were great. I believe it was June 14th, 15th, and 16th of 1985. Yeah. And those were great shows. I had a great time. My birthday is June 17th, so it was kind of a birthday celebration for me too, and knowing while I was in law school, I might not have the time to see as many shows. As it turned out, I saw a lot of shows in law school because, again, the law school was important, but not as important as going to see the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia. So,
yeah, hey, one other experience I want you to share with the audience, and I talked about it. I talked about how this happened. It was one of the most incredible moments in our Grateful Dead history. Was that Madison Square Garden Morning Dew show from September 18th, 87. I described it in that podcast on the show, but I think it's better to hear it from the horse's mouth. I'm going to have Doug tell you about how he snuck into the garden that day, and because I think it's an amazing story, and it was a formative night. And your tape, man, the tape you made that night, incredible, man. It's just the audience is so loud on it, and it's beautiful.
Correct. Yeah, I'll never forget that. It's one of the greatest moments besides my Grateful Dead life of my life. That's a show that I turn back to. It's been officially released, and the soundboard quality is great, but you're right, the audience is great. So I was in the middle of doing this tour. I was in law school at the time, and I was in the middle of doing this tour, and I had seen the show, I believe, on September 16th. Great Music Never Stopped, if I recall, to end the first set, and I taped that. I had my, I didn't have my microphones with me for some reason, but, I did, but somebody had a better spot, and they let me patch into their, so I taped the 16th, great show. The 18th, for some reason, I couldn't get a ticket for.
It was Friday night, Touch of Grey was a hit song. They won Letterman the night before.
The 16th was a Wednesday, was much easier to get. I went, that was the show I was talking about. And now I'm going to the 18th. I went with my friend Jeff. We go to the Garden from law school, where we went to at Hofstra, and we figured we could get tickets. How hard is it to get tickets? We had some money, we're willing to pay whatever. Nobody had there were no scalpers scalping tickets. Nobody had an extra ticket. We were walking around for like hours, it seemed. Nobody had a ticket. I'm panicking because I didn't want to miss a show. And I figured these guys are hot right now. The 16th was a great show. And I wanted to see them. I had my taping stuff with me. You don't go to a show, you don't have your taping gear and not get into
You knew you'd get in, but it was going to be
it was a bear. I didn't know how. So something stuck with me. So my friend Jeff and I thinking, how are we going to do this? And I thought my friend Steve, who Jeff knew, Steve Goldstein, shout out to Steve, one of my best friends, knew him since I was a kid, literally one of my best friends I ever grew up with. Our parents were best friends. He worked for the boxing department in the Felt Forum, which is, now I think it's called the Paramount Theater, but that was the basement area of the Garden where they would have boxing matches, they would have other concerts.
Grateful Dead, 1971 played there.
Correct. They would have shows. I saw Jerry Garcia Band there in 1982, an unbelievable show. So I knew he had worked for the boxing department. I'm thinking, hey, maybe if I get in touch with Steve, maybe he can do something, get us tickets. I called him up. He still was there because he worked late, I remember, on a Friday. This is, again, we got there so early, it's probably only 5 o'clock, 5:30. because we wanted to get there early enough to get tickets. I reached him. I was like, "Hey, is Steve Goldstein there? This is his buddy Doug." I knew the number for the boxing couple, and they find him. He's like, "Yeah, Steve's still here." Gets on the phone. I'm like, "Steve, I need your help, buddy. We need tickets. I'm outside." He's like, "Where are you?" Steve then comes outside. He looks around. You can tell he's thinking something, and he says, "All right, come." So me and Jeff followed him. We walked into the Felt Forum through the main doors. Nobody else could get in because he's an employee. He's got a badge or whatnot. He then takes us through an area of the Felt Forum. Then, I'll never forget, we go through this ramp that takes us towards the garden. We then go into an elevators that takes us up into the main area of the garden. He lets us off the elevator, and now we're on one of the mezzanines of the garden, one of those levels. I forgot what sections, but, it was red seats, blue seats, green seats, whatever the colors back then. And now we're in the garden. Steve was like, "Guys, you're on your own. I can't do much more for you now." So I'm thinking he's going to try to get us tickets or something. So it went from getting us tickets to sneaking us in. We're now inside the garden with our taping gear, with our bags of stuff, with the taping equipment in there. And we don't have a ticket, and it's only about 6 o'clock. The show wasn't starting until like 7:30, and I assume they let people in at 7, around that time. So Jeff and I are like, what are we going to do? We walk around, we see some security people, we saw people setting up in the concession stands, and we're like, we're too early. They're going to bust us because we don't have a ticket. And somebody says, "Hey guys, how'd you get in?" So we did the most logical thing. We went to the men's room. And inside the men's room, we just hung out in there. We went into a stall. We're just sitting there talking. Finally, a half hour goes by. Somebody comes in, and we realize it's the maintenance guy. So the maintenance guy is about to clean up the bathroom. We didn't want to get caught, so we stood inside the stalls on the toilet so he wouldn't see. And if he went to go in, we locked the door. We said, "Oh, I'm in here." That was it. He wouldn't have known we were tapers. He wouldn't have seen our bags and our taping equipment. We did this for a good half hour, just standing on the toilet, being silent, not saying a word, kind of laughing to ourselves.
How long was the guy in the bathroom?
Oh, probably 15 minutes, doing this thing. Cleaning up.
And he didn't go into the stalls.
Didn't go into the stalls. He might have knocked, and we just say, "Hey, I'm in here, Bob," something like that. So this took a while. And all told, we were probably in the bathroom for at least an hour. Finally, we hear somebody walk in. And you can tell these were now Grateful Dead fans, Deadheads, who had come in. They finally had let the audience in. It was 7 o'clock. And once we heard somebody say, "Hey, I'm psyched for the show," walked off the stall, got down onto the ground, opened up the stall door, and we beeline down to the taping section where we had our tickets. And we were a little late, but we set up in time, and we were so excited. The excitement, I've never felt that before. And we knew it was going to be a great show. Now, the first set was actually a great set, a little short, it was maybe only 6 songs, but that second set is an absolute classic. It really is.
And the crowd willed it because
no doubt.
It wasn't like super hot, but by the time they went after drums, it was just the crowd willed.
Unbelievable.
The best Watchtower Morning Dew.
Oh my God, it blew my mind. And I'll never forget, afterwards, we did an interview. A lot of times after the shows, we would talk about the show on tape because we had a lot of tape left, We would bring, at least 3 cassettes that could hold 4.5 hours of music, an hour and a half each cassette. So they probably played for close to 3 hours, and we had a lot of tape left. And I'll never forget that. The interview we did, just, spewing about how great the show was, talking about the Morning Dew, the Watchtower. That was the first Watchtower I've ever seen. I know they had played it before, but that was the first Watchtower I'd ever seen, and it was incredible. The Knocking on Heaven's Door encore was phenomenal. Just a great show.
Hearing the Watchtower going to the Dew, man, it was
unbelievable.
During Watchtower, like they had that
and
great
the Good
first
Lovin' and the La Bamba.
Yeah.
It's a great second set. It really is one of the greatest second sets I've ever seen.
I just remember as that Watchtower was ticking down, I was like, I think a Morning Dew's ready. If they go Watchtower Dew, it's going to be better than here, man.
Because if it was Watchtower, Black Peter, sure, the Black Peter might have been hot. If it was Watchtower,
it would have been a buzzkill. No matter how hot it was.
War Frat might have been hot, and they had played War Frat, I think, on that tour and did a great War Frat, but it wouldn't have been the same. And that Morning Dew is easily the greatest Morning Dew I've ever seen. Second one is probably Maine in Augusta.
Oh yeah, that's great.
That's an incredible Morning Dew. We saw that one, but that Morning Dew, it's one of the defining moments of my Grateful Dead life.
Garcia wasn't capable of doing what he did, but the crowd kind of willed him to the greatest heights. On
the emotion in the singing, when he says, I guess it doesn't matter anyway, I think he said it 3 times. And the last one, his voice crackled with such
And the
emotion.
The crowd was responding properly to every note and
To
gesture.
Correct. Every note. It was literally a religious experience. It's
Yep.
hard to describe it anything other than that. And I don't even believe in God, but that moment was a religious experience. It was
Oh yeah,
incredible.
definitely. That's what definitely a religious experience. Hey, so that was the tape I was most excited to get. I would always get my tapes from Doug after a show. Anytime, like if it wasn't a hot show, I wouldn't track him down. But I remember I was 18th row at that show with my girlfriend at the time. I dropped her off in New Paltz, got rid of her. I left you the tape, and I came back from New Paltz.
Oh, and I taped it for you?
Yeah, you taped it for me right away. You always, if it's a hot show, you always got it to me right away.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you dubbed it for me right
Sound
away.
quality of
There
that.
was no way I was not getting that right away.
Phenomenal sound quality. If you recall, because we were in the taping section. Oh man.
By the way, Doug's I uploaded your version of that onto YouTube. If you look up the 9/18/87 Morning Dew, it's Audience, and that's the one Doug actually taped.
Wow,
so
that's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for the shout out,
Oh
because
no, it's great, man.
I'll never forget that. And the interview after really summed it up. We were just so full of happiness, glee. We were blown away with what we had just seen. And knowing where I had come from, not having a ticket, probably thinking at the time, I might not get in. And I've never been shut out from a show. To the way we got in, the joy of getting in and setting up in time the equipment and taping the show. And that Morning Dew and the rest of that second set was unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. To this day, I will never forget that. It brings tears to my eyes talking about it, literally.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those moments you never forget. So kind of wrap up this taping thing, did you upgrade your equipment as you went along? Maybe you want to tell people about what your equipment was, that they might find that interesting.
Sure. At the time, I used a D5. Everybody knows the D5 was that small cassette that Sony made. It was great. It was for cassettes. Obviously, it's primitive in today's technology, but this was right before they upgraded to DATs, DATs. A lot of guys were switching to DATs, and I didn't think I needed to, because even though I wanted the best quality I could, I figured the cassettes were good enough. And little did I know the cassettes were going to be outdated within a couple of years anyway, because CDs came along and after the DATs. So I was using the Sony D5, which was a great tape machine. It was fantastic. That's what most of the tapers used. And a lot of guys were using Nakamichi microphones. I used what's called the Sennheisers, which were a little less treble but more bass, and they had a different sound than the Sennheisers. Sennheisers also had these extended microphones that would stick out, and I figured that might, when I started, that might tip somebody off that I was taping the show, and I wanted to be as cautious as I could. So the Sennheisers were smaller, didn't stick out as much, but they made some great sounds. And I have so many cassettes of the shows I taped just sitting in a storage facility. The reason I don't listen to them is, again, I've kind of moved on. The 80s are not my year. 1980 is, in the early 80s, yes. But I listen to mostly 1970s.
It's so easy to access other stuff if you need it.
Exactly. I could still get it. And they're all online too. But these audience tapes that I made, it's just incredible. The whole experience. It made the whole experience of seeing a Grateful Dead show that much better and more appreciative, that you can tape a show and then listen to it right after the show.
I benefited more than anybody because I didn't get involved in taping at all, but I knew I had the tapes.
Right, after every show. Exactly.
It's kind of funny, man, like personality types. I think if I went back, like if it were today, the type of person I am now, I would be taping.
Oh, of course. I
then,
had to. Yeah. The music was so important to me.
I knew I'd get it.
I saw guys doing it, and I was like, I want to do that. I needed to listen to a show after. And believe it or not, Howie, one of the shows that we went to that was the impetus for me wanting to tape was after that Buffalo show at Rich Stadium. We saw Dylan and the Dead. There was a guy who had the tapes on the plane. We were flying back from Buffalo back to where we lived in downstate New York. And he had a copy, and he let me listen to the Fire in the Mountain. That Fire in the Mountain from that Rich Stadium.
You didn't take that show?
No, I did not. For some reason, I was taping at this point, because this is 1987. But it was tough for me to bring all the stuff on a plane, and I didn't want to do it. But he had it, and I just remember listening to the show right after the show. There's something to be said about that.
Oh, it was great.
You don't lose any of the. You want to. What did I just
still riding
hear?
the high.
Exactly. You're riding the high. You want to know what was I just fooling myself? Was that just the greatest birth I ever heard?
Yeah.
You want to confirm your thoughts and your feelings of the music. So that's why the taping aspect is so great.
I don't remember the year, but the one year you'll remember doing this. We were in the Hampton Inn, the Holiday Inn in Hampton. And but wasn't there like a tapers, almost not I wouldn't say a convention, but about 10 guys knew each other. You were one of them. We came in with all the double decks, and
Correct.
there was this big, huge exchange of tapes.
Believe it or not, that you might be thinking in North Carolina.
Maybe it was not.
Yeah, there was a guy. I forgot his name. He was a
You
big
guys had like 4 or
taper.
5
Correct.
decks.
It was Larry Gindorf was there. I think his buddy was Andrew Klein.
Oh, yeah.
We
Klein.
set up. We had the double taping decks. I had mine. We brought with us, and we were doing this unbelievable tape session.
Yeah,
we must have
quickest
taped.
tapes could have came out.
It was
coming
unbelievable.
out.
There was a guy who I knew was a taper. He was a great. I think his name was Scott something. Scott. I can't remember his last name. It kills me to this day. Great guy. And we were going to see a show in North Carolina, probably in Charlotte or Raleigh.
Yeah.
And sure enough, his parents had a house in North Carolina. We went to the house. He set us up. He let us tape all of the cassettes that he had, because he left to go to the show to set up the tape. And we stayed for at least 5-6 hours taping everything we could before we had to leave to see the show. And he left us his collection. He said, just put them back. And we taped everything.
And there was
for
3 double
6
decks
hours.
there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Going this
Correct. We
Double
had
speed.
Correct. Double speed. We were doing everything as much as we could. I must have made 20 new cassettes in that afternoon before the show started. It was amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot to remember and forget. I think there was one time in the Hampton where there was a bunch of tapers together.
Oh, of course.
A huge exchange.
This North Carolina really sticks out because it was a guy's house and it was a great. He left us his entire collection that he had at his parents' house, and I had access to it in an afternoon, and I went nuts picking out all the best shows, because he said, no, there's the soundboards and these are audiences, and I just took every show I could. And
I was in there applauding. I didn't know that.
Right, you got the benefit of all the taping later on.
And the Betty boards came out. That was pretty exciting.
Oh, yeah. But for me, aside from taping and this, what changed my life, as you know, is that damn suitcase. That Europe 72 suitcase, when that came out. I was a 77 guy, such as you.
Before we jump down, I want to close with the Europe 72. So hang on to that thought for a second.
Sure. Got it.
Hey, so let's do one Dylan thing, man. I have one of my favorite memories of your taping. It was a Dylan show. It was July 21st, 1989. I think in part you were doing it for me because I love Dylan so much.
Correct.
You enjoy taping when you went places.
I was seeing a girl at the time, and she wanted to go see Bob Dylan. I was like, I might as well tape it, and I had the taping equipment. And this was somewhere in southern New Jersey, I think.
Yeah, Garden State Performing Arts Center,
There you
Homedale, New Jersey.
Right. We went, and I stuck in the equipment. And at this point, I was using a microphone that you could slide into the brim of a hat that I was wearing.
Wow.
They wouldn't allow the taping equipment out like they would at Dead shows.
You were sitting, in the second,
I was
third row?
sitting like third row, and I was wearing the hat that had the microphone, and it came down through my shirt into a bag, which I had the tape recording. And I got busted somehow. A woman must have seen, she was letting other people into our row, and she saw inside my bag the light of the taping recorder. Yeah. And of course she saw the meters. So she didn't notice anything with the hat because it was a perfect cover. The microphone would go through the top of the hat and you couldn't see it. It was one of those tiny microphones. But she was like, you can't, what are you doing? I was like, oh, nothing, it's a flashlight. She said, what do you, it's a flashlight. I was like, it's a flashlight. When I need to, if I'm drinking a soda, I need to see the soda. I want to make sure it's not, totally done. I need to see how much soda is left.
Carbonation's important.
Oh, yeah, the carbonation, I got to check that. I need a flashlight. And she said, that's not a flashlight. Are you taping the show? I was like, I'm not taping the show. It's a flashlight. She then walked away, and she came back 10 minutes later, and she saw the flash. She looked at my bag. She's like, are you taping the show? Because that's not allowed. I was like, lady, if I tell you it's a flashlight, why would I lie? And even if it wasn't a flashlight, who cares,
Yeah, and you also said, I think at one point you changed your story. You said, that's a camera. And you were like...
Exactly. The flashlight thing wasn't working so well.
And then this is coming out on the Dylan tape now. Most of this is going on during Just Like a Woman, which makes it even funnier. And the woman's there, and Doug was incredible. He went from flashlight to camera. He's like, don't worry about it. It's just me and my girlfriend.
Right. I tried, from where I was coming from, lady, what's the big deal? It's just me and my girlfriend. I'm not hurting anybody. And if I'm recording it, it's not going public. I'm not going to sell it commercially.
You're going to have to check it in with a security guard.
Right. And I didn't want to hear that. I was like, lady, just be calm. Trust me. Right. There's a lot of trust. I was like, trust me. Nothing bad's going to happen. Everything's cool. And she walked away and she never came back.
Trust me, this will come back to harm nobody. Just trust me.
And I taped the whole show, and you have it,
It's
correct?
incredible. I would have folded. I would have been like, please don't throw me out. I'll put the tape away.
I was so
You didn't give
persistent.
up, man.
I did not give up. I did not, because I felt in my right. Why am I not bothering anybody? Who cares? I'm not going to sell this commercially.
And it's such a great Dylan show. He did a rare Van Morrison song, One Irish Rover, a great version, Rolling Stone at the end. It was. I'm sorry, I listened to that tape so much. But
You
it's
still
always,
have it?
Yeah.
I need that. I need
it's
that.
great,
Just
man.
for my own edification, my own mementos.
Yeah, I think on I have a Facebook page. I'm going to try and print out. I actually listened to the tape and did an exact exchange between what you said and what the guard said. It's the funniest thing ever, man. But when you responded, you were responding in hushed tones, so not to hurt the tape.
Exactly. I didn't want to hurt the tape.
Integrity.
Correct. Right. That was important to me. So I tried as much as I could not to interfere with the taping. But you and I also taped a Dylan show where you had to pretend that you had a peg leg, I think it was called.
I wore the baggiest sweatshirts.
Right, to have the taping equipment, and you had the tape stand in your sweatpants with your leg.
That was another great show.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Didn't we screw up and I forgot to put record on for like the first set or something?
And I remember I got part of the tape, at least it was good. But eventually, it's a weird thing. That's one of the Dylan shows that did come out on a soundboard. It's a bootleg soundboard.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. So my taping days, not just Grateful Dead. I taped the Dylan, a couple other shows. I taped the Radiators when they came into New York City.
How many Dead shows did you think you taped, and when about was your last one?
I'll never forget. I believe 1988.
You stopped in 88?
I believe so. No, that's wrong. Because right. It was in the early 90s. And I'll never forget, I was in a show, I think in Chicago, and the problem with the taping is you had to constantly send away early to get the seats in the taping section. And of course, you'd have to send the money. You have to do it perfectly on a postcard. They had very regimented instructions, as you know, to get these taping seats.
I wouldn't know because I didn't do it.
Oh, yeah. It was ask other tapers. It was hard. You had to send them out early with the money order. Everything had to be perfect. If you misspelled the word Grateful Dead, they would send it back and you'd have to do it again. So I kind of just got sick of that. And I was just sick of, having to worry about taping it. And I knew I can get tapes from other people. So, this is now the early 90s.
Possibly
correct.
they weren't as hot as they were.
Correct.
So.
There's no way that they were as hot when I was seeing them in the early 90s. Correct. But I still loved the Dead, and I would go see them, but not with the frequency, that I had in the 80s. There's no doubt.
You did take the Branford Marcellus show on Nassau Coliseum.
Correct.
That one.
Was that 90?
90. That was
90, right, correct. Yeah. 1990. I was there and I was taping.
I believe the date's 329.90 with
correct.
Branford Marcellus.
Unbelievable show. That was a run of shows at the Nassau Coliseum that were great, and I taped all those shows, and they were phenomenal. I really enjoyed those shows.
That's going to lead to my next question. That's the one a show I should have went to, but I didn't. I didn't go. I went to the Knickerbocker the week before.
Correct.
I wasn't seeing the Deadhead, and I regret not seeing that show. Was there a show you missed that you kind of regret not?
Yeah, 4, 6, I think 82.
I knew that was going to be your answer.
Well, there's a reason. I'm now in Albany. We were doing that tour. This is the spring tour of 82. I wasn't taping yet, but we were going to all the shows, and it snowed like 17 inches in Albany and in Buffalo. And I'll never forget, there was no way we could make it to film.
Yeah, that was impossible.
Without the snow, I would have gone, but we were snowed in, literally. I know you went, and I have that sound. Well, what a great show!
So
that's the show that I lament missing.
We had the same snow in Nanuet, New York. It was 17, 18 inches.
Right,
but we only had 15 minutes to go to get to the Jersey Turnpike where there was no snow.
Correct.
So it was actually pretty easy for us.
Right. For me, it would have been, it would have taken me hours, and I didn't have the people to go with. I would have had to have driven by myself. I didn't even think I had a car at this point up in Albany.
Yeah,
so I couldn't do it. But right after that show, I did see the shows at Nassau Coliseum in April '82, and they were great.
Yeah. Oh, that was an amazing
great
tour.
Run of shows.
Unbelievable
tour in '82.
So that snow, the April 6th show, you had the great second set with the Shakedown, the Terrapin, Morning Dew, Sugar Mac. The only time that they ever played those 4 songs in one show.
Is that true? Wow, phenomenal. I haven't heard that tape in a while, but that's a phenomenal show. That's probably the best show of that tour. Maybe one of the best shows of '82.
Yeah.
And I missed it, but hey, you can listen to it now. You know what I'm saying?
That's all that matters. Like the Branford thing, I love it more than anyone could love it. I wasn't there.
Correct. Yeah, those shows are amazing. Yeah, those.
Since we're on that April 6th, '82, you remember what happened 4 days later on the drive back from Rochester?
Oh, is that when you fell asleep for the
No.
entire ride back? Oh, you're talking about when we hit the deer?
The deer, yeah.
Oh, there's an unbelievable story with that. Yeah, unbelievable.
Hey,
I
so-
think we didn't see them in Syracuse. We saw them in Rochester.
yeah.
Right? We wanted to see them in Syracuse, but we couldn't make it. This was during the Jewish holidays. I'll never forget that. The night before, I'm at a Seder in my grandparents' apartment in downtown New York City. You and I were on the phone talking because the next day was the Rochester show. We're trying to plan how we're going to go. And my father's like, yeah, it's fucking Passover. You know, how are you going to see the dead? It's Passover. He didn't get it. And my uncle was kind of sympathetic. He understood. He was like, well, maybe you could get your buddy to drive because my father wouldn't let me drive. It was I didn't even own a car. It would have been his car.
Yeah.
But you,
I may not have been a big taper, but I was a great driver.
great driver, and he took us to all the shows. So we hooked up. You were able to get the car. We drove to Rochester. It was a great show.
That's the first time I drove to a show.
True. We drove there. It was a great show. Didn't they do the Satisfaction?
Yeah,
maybe
going down the road, Satisfaction. Yeah.
And then maybe a Baby Blue
Yeah.
or something. We even predicted, at this point, the shows were more predictable. And we're thinking, well, they just played Not Fade Away the night before. What are they going to end with? And we predicted going down the road
Yeah.
like Satisfaction. We were able to do that, you know? And that was a great show. On the ride back, I think we slept in Rochester that night.
Goldie's house.
Or we went and slept in Syracuse.
Yeah.
Because my brother went there and Michael Rosenblatt was
Okay.
going there, and we stayed at one of the guys' houses in the college dorm. Next day we're driving back and we hit a deer on the New York State Thruway. True story.
First time I'm taking a road trip in my life. First I bring the car out to see
Your
on
dad's
the
car,
way
right?
back.
You didn't own it, I believe. It was your dad's car,
yeah.
right?
I see this deer on the hill, and it's running towards the thruway, and
Correct.
I hit the brakes, and it was,
We're going south on the thruway.
Yeah.
He hops
Deer's
the
going
deer,
west.
went over the northbound lanes, over the median, and keeps skipping along into the southbound lanes, directly into the path of our
Yeah.
car.
I
It's
soared,
as if
I
there
hit
was
the
divine
brakes.
intervention.
Yeah.
There was nothing we
Yeah.
could have done to avoid
I mean,
it.
I love deer, so there's nothing really funny, but we hit this freaking deer.
Out of nowhere.
We were live. That's the amazing
Exactly,
thing. The
right.
deer
We
was
could-
going 50. We were going 70.
Right, we could have died. So somehow, and then the deer, of course, we stopped the car to look because we were flabbergasted. What just happened? And of course, there's nothing we could do. We then left and we were panicked, so we started speeding to try to go home and make sure the car was okay.
The car
and
made it
sure
home.
enough, we got stopped by
A cop 5 minutes later, he had no sympathy. He gave us the ticket.
Right, we explained to him what happened. He's like, "Oh, you were supposed to report that," so we got a ticket for not reporting hitting a deer.
And there was blood still dripping on
Oh,
the front grill.
all over the front grill.
And now
all
this
over.
was a '78 Chevy Caprice, so any other car would have been totaled. So
Right. This was a
we
big
drove,
car.
We drove it home, man.
Yeah,
and,
we
and
drove-
it was repaired. Luckily, my dad was a very nice man. He repaired it. And
He didn't care much for deer. So.
Yeah, but it went on for several years.
Oh yeah, that was the car, that Capri we took to so many shows. Unbelievable. That I'll synonymous the Great Grateful Dead shows with that red Chevy Capri. There's no doubt.
Hey, and then the other funny thing is our last show together, our last road trip together, we saw Jerry Garcia band in Merriweather.
Correct.
And we're coming back from there, and as usual, we were down to the last cents in our pocket. we never came home with $100 in our
Oh,
pocket.
never. We would buy T-shirts. We would buy weed.
Yeah,
we would do what we had to do. Get
We're-
egg rolls.
We're holding
right?
out on the gas. We're like, one more exit. We got to this. It was the Philly exit.
Correct.
We ran out of gas. First time we ever ran out of gas, but we were only like 50 yards from the gas station.
We saw the gas station. It was right there. I saw the sign for Texaco or Sunoco, and we literally had to push the car
50
just
yards.
maybe
But
50
it was
yards.
amazing that we got 50 yards
We got
away.
that close, and we made it to get the gas.
And
on our last
it was
tour.
symbolic of our whole Grateful Dead experience, from starting with hitting the deer to running out of gas at our last show
No,
together.
that's true. The first trip we ever took was hitting the deer, and getting the tickets for that, and the last one running out of gas. So symbolic, unbelievable. What a long, strange trip, right?
Yeah, no, it was incredible, man. Everything about it, man. This with the arrests, the jail cells, but we're
Going through a toll booth.
Yeah.
That what you and I discussed last night. Going through the toll booth.
we're not. This could be like a 10-hour episode, but we're gonna wrap it up. But what I want to get to is Doug's passion, what he's listening to now with the Grateful Dead, and I'll let you take over.
Wow. So I was a 77 guy, after Howie and I, in our early times, listening to the 80s and those are the shows we went to. But when I found 77, it hit me hard. All these great shows, obviously Cornell, And the show after, the night after, in the War Memorial in Buffalo, that was one of the tapes I had, the audience that I got from Steve Meisner, also the Cornell. So these shows were such a big part. And then listening to other shows from 77, 11/4/77, that Colgate show. Oh my God, these are some of the greatest shows ever. I was a 77 guy till the day I die. And that's primarily what I would listen to. 78 also, not as much. 76, but not as much. 77 was the year. Until they released that suitcase with all 22 shows of Europe 72. Now, I knew some shows from 72. The Spectrum, 9/21/72. I had that in my collection. I got it as a bootleg. Had a couple of other 72 shows, and I liked it. It was a different sound from 77. Not as muscular, not as loud, not as, booming with the music never stops, but they were great. And I love Dark Star, and this is what really turned me on to Dark Star. But when I got that suitcase with all the shows, I listened to every show. And at first, I didn't get it as much as I do now. I listened to them sporadically. Taking a ride in my car, I put the CD in. Sitting in my office, I put a CD in. So I wouldn't listen to a full show at the same time, Then I started doing that, and it just blew me away. And believe it or not, the first thing that hit me from the Europe 72 tour was 9/21, the Bremen, a Beat Club show, or that other one. That other one blew me away. And I had listened to 4872, which is, to me, now one of the greatest shows ever.
421 Bremen, yeah.
Yeah. So the 4872 from London, it blew me away. I had listened to that show full driving to Sarasota. So it's about a 3-hour ride from where I live in Wellington, Florida. So I listened to that show in full on the ride there. And I'll never forget, my mind was blown listening to the Dark Star Sugar Magnolia Caution. I knew about the Dark Star because it had been released as somebody called a Glastonbury Fair. It was an album that the Dead released with only a portion of that Dark Star.
Wow.
But everybody used to rave about this Dark Star from London. So then I realized this is the Dark Star that everybody used to talk about. And
it's so powerful.
It's incredible.
Euphoric, I guess, would be
and
the
then
word.
I knew about Frankfurt. They had released that as 100-Year Hole, but now I had the whole show. Frankfurt,
all the songs,
100-Year Hole is a great CD, but there was like 13 songs that they omitted from that. So I listened to that whole show, and it blew me away. I'm like thinking, oh my God, this is by far, to me, the peak of the Grateful Dead was this Europe 72 tour. Then I listened to Bickershaw. I had never known anything about this Bickershaw show. I listened to that's a 4-hour show from start to finish without counting the break that they did in between sets. And to me, that show might be the greatest show they ever did all time. It's that good. So as I'm started listening to more shows from Europe 72 and listening to them in their entirety during a trip to Sarasota, I was able to really take in the full concert.
Yeah, there's so much, man.
My God. Paris, 5/3/72. To me, that's top 3 greatest show. In my mind, the 7 greatest shows, to me, that's just my personal opinion, are all from that Europe 72 show. As great as 9/21/72 is from
there
Spectrum.
was something about the Europe shows.
Because they were playing in these unbelievable auditoriums and theaters that would hold 2,000 people that each had an unbelievable history. Of Brahms playing there, of Mozart, of Wagner, of all these great, musicians.
And you're only a couple decades away from World War II.
Exactly. It was amazing. So I took in all that history, and it really hit me hard when I'm listening to these shows in full. In fact, I'm telling Howie, I just listened to Amsterdam, 5/10/72 the other day. I was able to listen because I drove to Saratoga. It's a 3-hour drive, and I listened to the whole show. And what an amazing show that is. I mean, that's the night before Rotterdam.
It's such a great show, but it can't even get into the top 7 of
exactly.
the tour.
It can't. It's not in the top 7. It's one of the greatest probably shows you'll ever hear, and it's not the top 7. And just as an aside, here's my top 7 greatest shows of all time. They're all from the Europe 7. And as much as I love 9/28/72 from the Stanley Theater, which is one of the greatest shows ever, 8/27/72, that unbelievable show from Veneta, Oregon, and how much I love 73 and 74.
The Bird song and that, which they didn't play.
Incredible, right? They didn't do one Bird in Europe 72, but just everything about Europe 72, it just tied together. Having Keith and Pigpen at the same shows at the same time, listening to Pigpen on his last legs. I mean, his voice maybe cracking a little, but the emotion in his voice was amazing. So
he was strong, especially early in the tour.
Oh, correct. He was amazing. So to me, these are my 7 top shows, all from 72. This is not open for debate. Obviously, you can agree, disagree, but this is a personal opinion. 4/8/72 gets it started. 4/4/14 from Tivoli is an amazing show. I don't necessarily put that in my top 7. It's definitely my top 10. Yeah. But after that, I go straight to 4/26. I'm sorry, 4/24. That show, I overlooked that Dusseldorf show. That show is unbelievable. And to be honest, I'm going to have to, I can't do 7. I'm going to have to do top 10.
And bigger story, you already...
Oh, exactly. That's my top show. So I've got all these unbelievable shows. Frankfurt's in there, Dusseldorf.
Germany was crazy.
5/3/72 Paris, one of the greatest shows of all time. To me, and Howie knows I've said this, is the greatest first set that the Grateful Dead ever did. Listen to that first set. It's got like 3 songs that made it to Europe 72, and it also has the Jack Straw that's on the second set. Greatest first set you'll ever hear. 5/7/72, that Bickershaw show.
Just for full consistency all the way through. That
greatest, the playing in the band, the Love Light, the other one. To me, maybe the greatest, probably the
Dark
greatest.
Star, the one together, man.
Phenomenal.
You get that,
Into Sing Me Back Home, one of the greatest shows you'll ever hear. And then after that, the obviously the Rotterdam show, 5/11. And then 5/23 Lyceum and 5/26.
That's the one that like I didn't need. I gotta say when I wrote the book Europe 72, I didn't know 5/23. I did
exactly.
It's so easy to overlook a monster show, and that's
of course because there's 22 shows, and you never listened to that show before. I had never heard it before I got the box set, the suitcase, and that show is phenomenal. So I might have named 8. And again, I love end of 71. I love those fall shows in 71. They were incredible.
When Keith first joined, it was incredible.
Yeah, and then when Pigpen comes back, and I think 12/2, when they play in the Boston Music Hall. Yeah. Phenomenal shows. All of 72 to me is great. I love 73.
Yeah, I was going to say, give my audience a taste of your favorite 73.
Oh my God, 73, 28, 73 from Springfield is incredible. Springfield, one of the hottest venues they've ever played. Check out any show they played in Springfield, you'll be blown away.
And their last one there was 1985, which happened to be a great show.
Great show. Yeah. So 3/28/73 is phenomenal. 4/2/73 is Boston, phenomenal. The shows in the May of 73, oh my God. The show from Iowa, I believe is what, the 5/10 maybe?
15,
5...
as far as I don't know, I'm the 5/14 maybe.
Yeah, and then they played an unbelievable show in Santa Barbara, which is 5/20. Yeah. Then they play an unbelievable show, Kezar, 5/26, one of the greatest shows you'll ever hear. Then 6/10, in that's I think
the second RFK show.
RFK show, phenomenal. Yeah. And then they closed the year with great show 10/19/73 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, one of the greatest shows you'll ever hear. 11/10/73 and 11/11.
That's definitely one of my favorites.
Phenomenal. 11/14 San Diego.
San Diego was a big surprise. That first set might be my favorite.
Oh, that first set is phenomenal.
Best black throw to win.
Oh yeah, phenomenal. Great. I think there's to close the first set is a China Cat Rider.
Oh yeah, it's a great cat.
Phenomenal. One of the best cats you'll ever hear. 11/17 Paulie Pavilion.
And also, how about the Nassau Coliseum shows from September?
Phenomenal. Oh yeah, those shows are great. And also I think it's 9/11. That's the show from the William and Mary.
Oh, great morning.
Phenomenal show. And it's just they were so consistently hot in 73. There's so many great shows that year. To me, in 74 has unbelievable shows, but 72, because I'm a Dark Star and Other One lover, I love the long, juicy jams. Yeah. Those are the best Other Ones.
Prime,
right. Having Pigpen in his last legs, having Godshell just joining the band.
They exponentially got better starting Europe 72.
No doubt.
How does a band get that great?
Exactly.
They were already great.
As great as they were playing in the Academy of Music, and there's some hot shows in March of 72, they just took an exponential leap when they landed in London on Easter Sunday.
Even that first show, the April 7th show,
it's a hot show.
I've overlooked it, but I'm grateful for their channel. They keep playing different cuts from it. I'm like blown away. I'm like, damn.
It's amazing. Yeah. So, as legend have it, this is a cavernous place where they played at the Empire Pool in London, and the acoustics weren't that good. So you'll read about it in the liner notes. They talk about how they set up these parachutes in the ceiling to absorb some of the sound, and by the second night the sound was great, they were feeling great, the audience was responding, and that's why when they came out in the second set of 4/8/72, this might have been the creative peak of their career. The trucking is a phenomenal standalone trucking.
Everything is
and that second set is phenomenal. They did, I think, Big Railroad Blues, and then Ramble on Rose.
And there's Hurts Me Too.
The Hurts Me Too is phenomenal. And then everything, all bullshitting aside, the Dark Star, Sugar Magnolia, into Caution, a lot of people will agree with me, might be the greatest 60 minutes of music ever by any band live. And to end it with the One More Saturday Night.
I think I'm taking a trip to Hollywood, Florida from here. I think I'm going to go right to the 4872, that segment for the ride, man.
It's beyond belief. It's that incredible.
That transition from the star to the mag.
Exactly. The reason why I bring that up is I don't think the Grateful Dead had ever... Now, there's some hot shows, there's no doubts. From 69, from 70, some great shows from 1970. 21370, that show was phenomenal. One of the greatest shows ever. The 5270 Binghamton show is phenomenal. I love that show. I listen to that frequently. 51570. Yeah. It's just that this was the Primal Dead. They were going through some changes in 71 and 70 into 71 and 72.
Yeah, they had so many songs to work into their repertoire.
Exactly.
You know, so.
By 72, you could just tell that they were just evolving into this monstrous force. And it really took hold in Europe 72. And I point to 4/8/72.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed to that.
Started all
because I had two more comments on that. The best Cumberland ever in that first
set.
Oh, my That's God. The last on the Europe 72
By
album.
far. That's a great first set. They open with Bertha, Hot Bertha. Yeah. They do a Me and My Uncle, Mr. Charlie, which was a great trio to start the shows in Europe 72. That first set is not the greatest first set ever, but it's phenomenally hot. And there's a great Looks Like Rain. It's just... beautiful with Jerry on the pedal steel.
Then
it's phenomenal.
After the big segment in the second set, after the end of the show, you get the best One More Saturday Night ever.
That Saturday Night is full of passion. Yeah. He's a wail away. Bobby's into it. He says that Mr. Garcia, take it away or something like that.
And then Keith and Jerry are just hopping and bopping.
It's unbelievable. You can tell. You can point to that show that's really where Europe 72 started. And they never let go.
Yeah.
From that show, then they go to Copenhagen, where they were incredible.
And even with the days off in between, they never lost any momentum.
Oh, of course. And Jerry's been interviewed saying he was dripping with music. The only problem was he didn't get to play enough. They had to have gaps because they were going from country to country. You can't play in England one day and the next night be in Copenhagen. You had to travel. You had to get all the equipment there. And I get that. But you can tell that they were so hot. They were just so in the moment. And to me, hey, if you guys out there listening and don't have that Europe 72 suitcase, get it. I didn't get it when it first came out.
Or at least get all the music. I don't know that you
exactly.
It's not that easy to get the suitcase.
It's not. It costs money, but the reason of getting that show, the liner notes are incredible. Yeah. You get to read there's a booklet that talks about the tour, which is incredible.
A friend of mine sent me the copies of all the liner notes.
The liner notes are worth the price of admission just for that book.
I wish if I go back in time, I do regret not getting the...
and I paid $800 for this, but it was a birthday present to myself. This was now... I think it came out in 73. It didn't come out in 72, did it?
What?
The box set. I think it was either the end of...
2012?
Right, 2012. Europe 72 came out. So it came out towards the end of 2012, I believe. And I wasn't privy to it coming out, so I had to get it secondhand on Amazon. Wow. I think it was either eBay or Amazon. But it was the best $800 I ever spent. Because I go back to that tour.
It's even tough to get an 800 now.
Correct.
Like
I think right. I think I got it at a great price. And again, you get so many extras included. It's just, for me, that's the essence of the Grateful Dead. Because I'm a jam guy. I love the other ones from that tour and the Dark Star. To me, the four greatest other ones are from that tour in sequence. 421 Beat Club, 426 Frankfurt, 5-3 Paris, and then 5-7 Bickershow.
I love Bickershow.
And you can add the fifth to me is the 5-10 show from Amsterdam. To me, those are the five greatest other ones ever.
And I forget exactly what the date is. It might be 525 or the 24. Like
that was in the Lyceum.
Yeah. One of those shows has a ridiculous other one. It goes into like Miles Davis kind of territory.
I think that's 524. Yeah, because the 23rd there's that Dark Star into Morning Dew, which is to me just phenomenal.
They played 7 or 8 Jerry tunes out of 9 songs.
So you guys listening could tell I'm passionate about Europe 72, and for me that really was a turning point for me. Again, I was a 77 guy. I knew the early 80s. I even knew the 70s. I didn't really know 72 that well. Just apart from some of those great shows like Veneta and the Spectrum. Yeah. And when I got that suitcase, I'm telling you, that suitcase changed my life.
You can never know that suitcase well enough, man. It's like you keep going back to it and keep being amazed like you were with Amsterdam. Some stuff even surprised you after all the times you've listened to it.
It's incredible. Like this Amsterdam show is so underrated.
All right. Hey, we've hit an hour mark, man.
Wow.
We could have sat here for 5 hours, no problem.
Absolutely.
Man. But,
absolutely.
Hey,
what are you doing later? right?
4872 is definitely on the.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, Howie. Hey,
my pleasure.
Shout out to Howie for all the books he's written. I refer to them all the time. When I listen to a 77 show, I immediately go to Howie's book and read his reviews, because for me, it's engaging.
77 Rise of Terrapination.
What a great book. And Howie, to me, I think that, not that you wrote it specifically for me, but your book on 72 Revisited, talking about that Europe 72 tour, I refer to that book repeatedly.
It was the 50th anniversary. My only regret with that is I wish I had more time to spend on it, do more research.
Exactly. You had a deadline of April 8th, if I recall.
I decided to write it about 5-6 months before, so I didn't get a chance to reach out to enough people.
Exactly, instead of maybe a year before. But still, that book, Howie, it's amazing. It's the only book that I know of written specifically about Europe 72. And that's, to me, the pinnacle of the Grateful Dead. So I thank you, and everybody should be thanking you for your books and for what you do for the Grateful Dead community.
I appreciate it, man. I'm kind of like you. I have the platform now. I'm the author. I'm on Facebook. I got the podcast.
Exactly.
This man, I swear, he turned more people onto the Grateful Dead by word of mouth. Anyone who came into his life. It could be the freaking mailman. He would make the mailman listen to the Grateful Dead.
To end on that note, my brother Eric, I got into the Grateful Dead, reminded me of an unbelievable moment, because I visited Eric in I think it was 1990. I was going there because I wanted to become a sports agent. I was in law school and I wanted to do entertainment law and be one of those sports agents. So I went to recruit, if you recall, I told you the story, Steve Thompson, who was a player for the Syracuse basketball team, and Derek Coleman. So I went there to scout them. I was working for a guy who was doing some of this stuff as a sports agent, but I never got to meet the guys. However, I did turn an entire fraternity onto that deal. The deal I'm talking about, I think it's 3/27/83. I had all these guys in a room, and my brother said, Doug, you got anything? Because these guys were just starting to get into the Dead because of me. I turned Eric on, who turned this guy on, who turned that guy on, and I was in a room, in a dorm, with 20 guys, playing the deal from 3/27/83, and these guys afterwards were clapping and hooting and hollering and thanking me, and that's a moment I'll never end. It's my pleasure turning people onto the Grateful Dead. The message has to be spread.
Yeah,
has to be spread, guys.
It was nonstop. It was like there's people that came into my life that wouldn't even think. You never prejudged anybody.
Exactly.
You said
any person has the propensity to like the Grateful Dead. Just listen to Jerry Garcia, because when you love something so much, you want to spread the word.
I guess we both I picked that up from the enthusiasm from you, and it's carried on in my career with the books and the podcast.
Exactly. Thanks to Howie for perpetuating, for continuing this.
And when I have certain topics, I'm gonna get you back, because I think the audience is gonna dig this interview and they're gonna want to hear you again. So.
Hey, thanks everybody. It's a pleasure, and thanks Howie. Thanks everybody out there. We love you, and we love the Grateful Dead.
All right. Thanks for listening. Peace out.
It's fucking awesome, bro. You know that?
All right, there it is, the Doug Schmell interview. I want to thank Doug for taking the time to do that. It was great to meet his family, including his dogs, Tucker and Blossom. And we had a great time reminiscing there on the interview. Very cool to get together with him. And we're going to bring him back for an encore presentation and for a future episode of the Deadology podcast. Once again, this is season 2, and that was episode 2. If you want to read more about our tales from the day, my first book, my memoir, Tangled Up in Tunes. There's a lot of Doug Schmell in there as I go through our touring years, and once I get finished with the Dead, I go into my Bob Dylan touring years with the Never Ending Tour. Tangled Up in Tunes is available on Amazon, and that's the name of my website, tangledupintunes.com, where also all my other books are available at. Once again, thanks for listening. Peace out.